Good morning. It is so exciting to be here with you guys. Came in from LA, love Atlanta. I hate how you're stealing all of Hollywood, but it is exciting to be here with you guys at Orange. I want to talk to you for a few minutes about how human beings are shaped, because you have the incredible responsibility and privilege of working with human beings from 0 to 18. And you will be one of the primary influences in the world that exists inside of them. We humans are fascinating species. In fact, humans are probably my favorite species. I love studying you. I love learning how the uniqueness of who you are is created as a chemical compound of experiences and responses. And one of the interesting things about us as human beings is that, well, we're designed as open-looped creatures. And what that means is that outside forces can actually shape our inner world. What we say to each other, how we respond to each other, the environment we're in, the emotions around us affect us. Now, reptiles are closed loop, which is why I never understand people having like snakes as pets or iguanas as pets, because that iguana never feels anything about you. It never changes its mind about you. That snake never loves you, may love to eat you, but really has no affection towards you. But human beings are open-looped. And what that means is that there's an aspect of your inner world, an aspect of your soul, an aspect of your essence that is vulnerable to outside factors. So we're shaped by the people in our lives. We're shaped by the environment that we live in. We're shaped by the things we say. And that's what I really want to focus on for a few moments. I want to talk to you about how language, how communication, how the things we say to each other are the dominant material from which our inner worlds, our identity, our well-being, our essence is designed, shaped, and expanded. We are affected by each other. Have you ever been in a room with people who are all excited and you came in depressed? Maybe that's this morning. And you get around people filled with hope and all of a sudden you are filled with hope. It's a beautiful thing. But you may have also experienced where you've walked in a room and you're full of hope, you're excited, you're ready to go, and everyone's depressed. Everyone's negative. Everyone thinks the world is coming to an end, and before you know it, you're depressed. And you're negative, and you think the world's coming to an end. What's happened is that open loop was opened in the wrong direction. And one of the curious things about us as human beings is that a huge part of how we understand ourselves are all the voices inside of us. Now, I know for absolute certainty, there are at least 1 or 2 or 3 voices that all talk to you at the same time. And some of our own journey is, which one is the voice of God? Which voice of all those inner voices are the voice of God? Now, if you're like me, I have a very crowded inner world. A lot of people got in here early, and it's hard to get them out of me. And here I am at 66 years old, and I can still hear voices that spoke into my life when I was 6 years old. And what's really frustrating in all that is that the positive voices disappear very quickly. But the negative voices seem to stay with me all of my life. I cannot remember, I'm sure some teacher in 6th grade, in 8th grade, in 11th grade said something positive to me. I'm just absolutely sure there was at least one teacher who liked me, saw potential, and tried to inspire me. I don't remember them. I'm hoping it's not because it didn't happen. I'm hoping it's because I have selective memory. But I do remember the teacher who told me on the last day of high school, "Erwin, have you thought about going to college?" And I said, "Yeah, maybe." She goes, "You will never make it." I was very polite, so I said, "Thank you." But that's my last imprinted memory of high school. And what we oftentimes underestimate is the power of the words we speak to shape the lives of other people. Now, we live in Hollywood, California, and we're actually right in the heart of Hollywood. And so I live in the world of all the wonderful language of energy, visualization, manifestations, all this language my wife hates. And I started using the language of energy about 40 years ago, and which is one of the reasons I don't get invited to Atlanta. And my wife hates that energy language. She would tell me, it's not energy, it's attitude, it's emotions. No, honey, I just don't like your energy. I don't like you. And so we kind of go back and forth on this thing. And I just loved when the world shifted in my direction and energy drinks came out. I would just pull them off the shelf. Look, honey, energy drinks. Energy bars. It doesn't even say sugar anymore. It says energy. The entire world shifted in my favor, and my wife hates this world. One of the words she hates is that word manifesting. And we have it all around us. We have a lot of people who do not believe in God, but do believe in manifesting, which takes more faith. But by the way, I'm pretty open, so I try things. I go, let's see if it works. And I can tell you, it doesn't work. And because there's a lot of things I tried to manifest and it just didn't happen. And one day I realized that I was trying to change the wrong universe. That manifesting doesn't change the universe around you, it changes the universe within you, but it doesn't happen the way people tell you. See, what the scriptures actually tell us is that everything that exists was created by a sound, created by a frequency. It was created by God speaking into existence all that is when he said, let there be light. And when God speaks, reality happens. And we are a reflection of God, an echo of God's immense capacity, beauty, and wonder. We cannot do what God does, but we reflect so much of what he does. And so even though we can't speak and create universes that do not exist, when we speak, we actually create the universe inside of each other. And so when you look at a little child and you tell them that they will never amount to anything, you are shaping a universe inside of them. When you tell them that they're worthless, that they have no talent, no skill, no ability, you're actually speaking a universe into existence inside of them. But when you look at a child and you tell them, you have incredible talent, you can do this, you're tough enough, you can work through this challenge, I believe in you. Those words actually speak and create a world inside of each one of us. Isn't it amazing that words have so much power? I mean, think about what's happening right here, right now. I'm actually just emitting sounds. And those sound waves are going out into space, and they're traveling through this space, and they're penetrating inside of your inner world. And when I speak, those sounds create images in your mind, and those images create emotions, ideas, and may even shape your inner world. That is so sci-fi. That feels like it's just so futuristic. So I can say elephant, and you cannot help but see one. That's the power of words. That words translate sounds into meaning, and they change us. So I began studying human communication over 40 years ago and tried to understand what is it about the way we communicate as human beings that requires such nuance. It goes beyond words. I'm an immigrant from El Salvador, so Spanish was my first language. I learned English here in the States, and I had to learn English at least 6 times when I moved across the United States. Because I learned English in Miami, then I learned it in Raleigh. And let me tell you, Florida and North Carolina speak 2 different kinds of English. And when I went to the Northwest, it's a different kind of English. When I was in Queens, New York, that was a very different kind of English. And then I went out to Los Angeles, and I did not want to become a Valley girl. But I had to learn a different approach and form of English, because even the language itself changes environmentally. And when you speak different languages, you realize that inside of those languages, there are frequencies. Have you ever listened to someone speak to you in French, but they're angry with you, and they're cussing you out? It's like they're reading a poem. Like they're just absolutely just ripping into you, and you're like, oh, I think he loves me. But if you ever go to the Middle East And this happened one time to me. I was at an event and a man stood up and started speaking to me in Arabic. And he did have a gun, so that did affect my view. But he started yelling at me and moving his hand like this in my direction. And he was so urgent and so intense. And I looked at my translator. I was wondering if he was going to run. And he was actually blessing me. He said, if there were Christians like you here, our nation would be changed. I wish a blessing that you would have many children. My wife did not receive that. But just because of the language, it sounded as if he was angry with me. My wife and I, we traveled Italy for a couple of weeks years and years ago. She won't go back until the entire nation apologizes. And because everywhere she went, people seemed angry with her. They're rude. I said, they're not rude, they're Italian. My wife is Irish. Yeah. Wow. Remember one time I was talking about the world, how different cultures have given gifts to the world. And she goes, what have we brought to the world as Irish? I said, tubs. So my wife's very intense, and we've been married 41 years, and I hesitantly say I've been married to the same woman for 41 years because she's not the same woman. And she's changed at least 400 times, and so I never get bored. Every few months I'm married to a new woman, and then the same body, but not the same person. And for the first year of marriage, I did not have how to communicate with her. And she didn't know how to communicate with me. And I would say to her with such depth of feeling, this really, really bothers me. And she would just keep doing it. And I would just say, this really, really makes me mad. And she would just ignore it, just keep doing it. And about a year or so later, 18 months really, because that's when we had we didn't have a fight for 18 months until Black April. And then we had one fight for 1 month. And I said, you won't listen to me. When I'm angry, you don't take me seriously. You don't take my emotions seriously. You're not listening. She goes, how am I supposed to know if you're angry? Because I say, I'm angry. She goes, yeah, but you don't yell. I'm not Irish. I'm Latino. We say things in very, very subtle ways. If someone did that to someone else, they would be really upset. And we had to learn how to get on the same frequency. This is what I really wanted to highlight for a few moments. That we humans are designed in such a complex, beautiful way. That we are designed by God to speak to each other, not for the purpose of communication, but for the purpose of connection. That what every human being longs for is human connection. And the only way you can move toward deep connection is to have authentic communication. So we spent years studying the entire art form of human communication and developed a process that we call the 7 frequencies of communication. We've identified 7 signature frequencies that human beings use in which we communicate one to the other. And I know the language of frequencies is going to be like the language of energy, so I just want you to hang with me. Because what's amazing is that it's not really even a new study. Back in 1680, a guy named Robert Hooke actually created the science of somatics, where they studied how sound waves create patterns in the material world. It's a fascinating thing. And then I saw some of the interesting philosophy of Masaru Emoto, who claimed that when you speak to water, it crystallizes in different forms. Now, I don't know about that, but I do know this. The words we speak to each other and the frequencies from which we speak them will shape the people in your life. It will shape you. And once those voices get inside of you, they become a part of you, and they become a part of your inner voice. So I want to take you through these 7 frequencies if I can. And let's see if you can self-identify. I'm going to go through them really, really quickly, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the shadows of each one. 7 frequencies of communication. The first one is the motivator. I start here because they're the most enjoyable. They're the most likable. They're the most popular. If you go on social media, if you go on Instagram, if you go on TikTok, a lot of the speakers, they're motivators. And what I love about motivators is that they bring an immense amount of energy into the room. Have you ever been around friends who they just light up the room the moment they walk in? They're so positive, they're so optimistic, but they're like the human form of Dalmatians. They're just like, I'm just so happy, it's so good, it's good to see you, I love that dress, I love that shirt, I love everything. And motivators are just the people who believe in you. I have a friend named Brendan Bouchard, and we do a lot of events together, and Brendan's always backstage like this. He's making me nervous. He's like high energy, he's like all this energy wrapped up in skin. You're expecting the guy to explode, and he does on stage. And he brings so much belief in people. I had another friend who, for a living, was a motivational speaker, and then he came to know Jesus. And I watched him shift. He said, you need to believe in yourself. And then he came to Jesus and said, you need to believe in what Jesus believes about you. He was still trying to build a person's self-belief, that you're designed uniquely to do something beautiful, that your life is intended to have significance and meaning. And when you're around a motivator, you believe in yourself. You are drawn to all the verses that say, I can do all things through Christ which strengthens me. You actually see the Bible through the motivator. Look at everywhere God's telling you can. Mariah, who's been leading worship with MSC, she has a little girl named Juno, who's now my favorite human. And I can hear that motivator frequency in Juno. Sometimes for herself, look, I did it. I can do it. But sometimes Juno, already not even 4 years old, has turned that motivator frequency on others. She grabbed me by the face, pressed into my cheeks and said, Bobby, you can do it. You can do it. I'm melting going, yes, I can. Yes, I can. I believe in myself. Thank you, Juno. But then there's also others besides the motivator. There's the challenger. The challenger is not like the motivator. The motivator says, you can do it. I believe in you. The challenger says, you're not even halfway there yet. You have more in you if you're willing to sweat, bleed, die. And they see the Bible very uniquely. Unless you die to yourself, unless you take up your cross. It's amazing how the Bible is translated differently for challengers. They love every challenge. In every place they're told, yes, you're saved by grace. Now get to work. Every challenger I know in the business space, they love Kobe Bryant. They're always quoting Kobe. I got there at 6, Kobe was there at 4. I could hear Kobe, from eternity going, why did you go to sleep? I was at the gym before I took my first breath. Challengers always believe you're almost there. My beautiful daughter, Mariah, her primary frequency is challenger. So when she sends me texts, they're usually very, very poignant, reminding me of what I'm capable of. And I'm always inspired by Mariah to be better, to do better, to reach my full potential, and I hope one day, when I grow up, I will. And there's also the commander. The commander frequency is a frequency that's very utilitarian. They don't care about inspiring you to believe that you're great or to challenge you, to tell you there's more in you, more greatness inside of you. The commander is very utilitarian. You just need to do this. Get from here to here. I know what you need to do. And the commander frequency has a high level of authority and power, and they earn respect. Now, I have been given the great gift from God to be married to someone whose primary frequency is commander. So my wife, Kim, she speaks to me from command for 41 years. And she's really refined the power of this frequency. And by being so incredibly clear to me what I need to do. Before I go to bed, every night, she says, lock the doors, turn out the lights. I did that last night, and the night before, and the night before. In fact, I've done it for weeks and months and years and now decades. But right in the place of I love you is lock the doors. So I had to learn how to translate Kim's commander frequency. When she says, take out the garbage, what she's saying is, I need you. But then you have the healer frequency. The healer frequency is that frequency where when someone speaks, you suddenly feel safe. You feel seen. And it can be a little bit uncomfortable because you may not be ready to be seen so clearly. They see through the facade of your strength and your confidence, and they see your wounds, they see your pain. They somehow sense the struggle that you're in, and when someone communicates with the healer frequency, it's this interesting intersection of discomfort and healing. Because you realize you cannot be healed unless you open the wounds and let the toxins out. Men and women who have a healer frequency have an incredible and uncanny ability to look into us and see us and know us and accept us in our brokenness. Now, you can kind of identify someone with a healer frequency. Have you ever just walked around and saw someone, and maybe it's happened here, you go, how you doing? Doing great. And then you just keep going. And you know they didn't mean it and you didn't mean it, but that's okay. It's just what you do, all right? See, if you trip across a healer, they go, how are you doing? You'll go, great. They just stop you. They look right into your eyes. No, how are you really doing? You're like, I was doing okay a minute ago, but and of course the challenge with that healer frequency is that you see everyone as broken. There are times, like if you're not broken, you don't need my healer frequency, so I need you to be broken. I have friends who have healer frequency, and like, Erwin, you need to get in touch with your inner child and your inner wounds. And like, I'm feeling pretty good, you know, and it's just like, I'm just really enjoying life. No, you're just not being honest. You need to be real. You're in pain. You just don't know you're in pain. I go, you're right. I've been holding it inside. I didn't even know until right now. You just stripped me bare. And then you have the professor frequency. And the professor frequency is a very data-driven frequency. It's that frequency that believes that information is the transformative power of human change. And when you have someone with a professor frequency, they're always telling you what they know. They're sharing with you information. They're sharing with you data. A mind is a terrible thing to waste. They're always trying to transmit what's in their mind into your mind. And one of the unique things about this frequency is they really do believe all of reality is data. I've had two really interesting situations like this. One was with a Harvard professor, and he's fascinating, and he's an expert in happiness. But in a Q&A that we were doing together, someone asked the question, you know, how do you deal with emotions? And he said, well, you have to realize that emotions are just data. Oh, that fixes everything. Right. I'm not mad, I'm just over-informed, right? And I have this other friend who, he has the highest IQ in the world, or at least, you know, he's told me that he might, because he's tested. You know, there's been TV shows designed around his life, very unique guy. And he kind of was a little scary. The TV shows, I think it's called Scorpion, was built around him. And the first time I ever spoke at this particular business event, he was a speaker and I was a speaker. And then at the lunch table, he came over, sat with me, and he said, I have been told that a conversation between us is inevitable. I'm like, wow, I am inevitable. And I was a little nervous because, I don't know if his IQ was like 200. It's like 200 above mine. So I was like, okay, I'm in a deficit, but it's okay. And he just started saying, I disagreed with half of everything you said. That was his opening line. He said, and I can show you that you're wrong just by showing you the facts. I had to get up and speak again. He was right there. So I thought, you got the highest IQ in the world. The Miles will use him as a reference. So I said, hey, by the way, we had lunch, Walter and I, and he said he disagreed with half of everything I said, which means he agreed with half of everything I said. So I'm doing really, really well. And then he said, all he had to do is show me the facts to prove that I was wrong. And I said, but he's right. The facts are always against me because the facts always point to the past, not to the future. But the future has been on my side quite a few times. So he calls me at home after I do this talk on frequencies. And I say, professors are all about data. He got my home number, it made me a little nervous. He calls me up, he says, I have a question for you. I have a follow-up conversation. I go, okay. He goes, you said that the professor frequency is all about data. And I thought, I insulted him. He goes, what else is there? So what? He goes, yeah, every frequency is about data. All there is data. I said, well, no, there are other ways of knowing. He goes, like what? I said, love, data. This frequency is such a data, information, logic, truth frequency that they believe if they can just have more facts that they win. And it's a powerful frequency when they're passing on their knowledge to you. And then there's the seer frequency. And the seer frequency is a frequency that emits vision, but it does more than just emit vision. It actually translates hope. What so many times we miss out on is this seer frequency, this visionary frequency, this frequency that is always pushing us toward the future, allows us to have an emergence of hope that causes us to believe that we can change, that our lives can change, that the world can change. When you're around a seer frequency, all of a sudden, all the lines that limited your imagination are erased. You begin to see possibilities you could never have seen before. When you're around the seer frequency, it pulls you out of being trapped in your past and just stuck in the present to begin to live for the future. I'm convinced it's one of the reasons people gather together around the world is because seers are so rare that we'll gather to hear them, not so that we can get their vision, but so that we can have our vision emerge. And then you have the maven, and that's the seventh one. I won't spend a lot of time there because there's not very many of them. But the maven frequency is that frequency that is the outlier. They're the person that sounds like they're a heretic. They sound like they're unorthodox. And you're not sure if they're a genius or just insane. And one of the interesting things about having a maven frequency is that you don't actually try to think outside of the box. You don't know how to think inside the box. One of my favorite things about being here in Atlanta is that 30 years ago, I spoke at an event called Catalyst. And I actually made a statement that Solomon was wrong. That there's nothing, when he said there's nothing new under the sun. And I got blacklisted for the next decade. And finally got invited back. And strange enough, because I think this is the way God does things, right before I spoke, Andy Stanley got up there and said, hey, we all know that Solomon was wrong when he said there's nothing new under the sun. And everyone broke out in applause. And I said, that's not how you responded to me 10 years ago. You broke out, but not in applause. And I can tell you, it was rooted in such deep things because 10 years before that, I'm in my living room with my wife, Kim. I said, honey, I just can't keep it inside anymore. I've been studying and studying, look at the scriptures. Ecclesiastes is like my favorite book. And I said, Solomon was wrong, Solomon was wrong, Solomon was wrong when he said there's nothing new under the sun. And my wife, Kim, she's so supportive and so loving. That's why we've lasted for 40 plus years. She looked at me and she said, you are going to hell. And I said, do you have a follow-up statement? And she said, please never share that outside of this room. I need you to commit to me right now that you'll never say this outside of our house. I held that for 10 years. And when you have a maven frequency, you spend your life trying to see the world the way everyone else sees it. You're not trying to be different. You're actually trying to be the same, and you still somehow don't make it. And so when you have that frequency, it oftentimes disorients people and makes them wonder, is this actually really real? Which is what you might be thinking today. By the way, each one of these frequencies has a shadow. And what's been really curious since I wrote the book, people are more interested in the shadows than they are actually the frequencies. There's something dark about us humans. And what I thought was really interesting to me, though, is when I first started unwrapping the 7 frequencies of communication, I did this with our mastermind called The Arena. And I said, pick a TV show, and I will walk you through all the characters of that show and their frequencies. They picked 2 shows, Friends and Succession. Now, I had never seen Friends, but I actually had seen Succession, and it seemed a little more interesting to me. So I picked Succession, I went and watched the pilot again, and I couldn't find a single frequency. And I had a panic attack. Going, this doesn't work. There's not a single frequency in any one of the characters on this show. Then I heard this little inner voice that said to me, look at the shadows. I went back and watched the first 3 episodes, and I realized the 7 main characters were perfect examples of each frequency, but only from the shadow. Which of course prompted the question, do we have a generation that's only learning how to communicate out of their shadows rather than out of their authentic frequencies? Which prompted a deeper question for me. Are people rejecting Jesus not because of the truth we're communicating, but the frequencies from which we're communicating them? The shadow of the motivator is the performer. The motivator wants to pull out the greatness in you, wants to build in you a deep sense of belief, but the performer needs you to believe in them. They perform for you, they want you to adore them, they live for the applause. And I was working with this world-class communicator who was a gifted performer. And I started walking him through the journey toward authenticity, and he said, I don't know if I can do that. And I said, just try once to be authentic. He sent me a text. I went and spoke. I made a commitment to be authentic. It did not go well. I think I'm going back. It's so much easier to be a performer because you read the room and you give them what they want rather than what they need. The shadow of the challenger is the manipulator. And so when you have this powerful frequency of someone who can call you to greatness, but instead of pulling the greatness out of you so that you can fulfill your calling, they actually manipulate you and challenge you to use your gifts and talents for their purpose. The commander, when they're in their shadow, is a dictator. The commander moves you and calls you and directs you for your good, for your future, so that your best self can be expressed. But when they're a dictator, they use that same authoritative power to get you to do what they want you to do for their own personal benefit. The shadow of the healer is the cipher. The person who can read your brokenness, they can read your wounds, they can read your pain, they can see into your soul, and they manipulate your emotional distress for their own personal benefit so that they can actually have their own wounds and needs met. You can always know that cipher because they're the person, after you've invested and invested and invested in their life, to look at you and say, you let me down. You were not there for me. They just disconnect, throw you away, and make you feel like you were not enough. The shadow of the professor is the diminisher. Instead of pouring into you knowledge and information and data so you can grow, They actually diminish you and tell you you're stupid, you're never going to amount to anything, that your ideas are ridiculous, so that they feel bigger than you by pushing you down. The shadow of the seer is the perfectionist. They don't simply cast a great vision of the future. They hold everyone into a micromanaging environment where they have to do it their way or it's not the right way. And then the shadow of the maven is the nihilist. Instead of looking for new ways to solve the world's problems, they believe there's no solution. And they bring a hopeless, nihilistic picture of the future to the world. And what I hope we can wrap our minds around in these moments is that we human beings are designed in such a unique way that we connect at a deep, organic level. Two of the interesting dynamics that I saw in the world of science is that there's this interesting theory around quantum entanglement, that when particles connect, no matter how separated they ever are, they're forever connected. Which makes sense why when someone spoke into your life at 4 years old, it's still affecting who you are now. And there's this also interesting dynamic of quantum vibrations, where the view that the way the universe is created is that there had to be some kind of fluctuation, a quantum fluctuation that created all of reality, which is actually what the Bible says, that God spoke, and through that vibration, all of reality came into existence. Let me tell you, it can take you to such deep levels. I remember one time I was traveling out of town and I came home after 2 weeks and I walked into the house and the first thing Kim said to me was, take out the garbage, which I knew meant, I've really missed you. But I didn't respond well because I wasn't listening to what she was really saying. I was just listening to what she said. And I said, hey, I just got home, I'm tired. Can I just sit for a minute? She goes, I'm so sorry. She was making me something to eat. She goes, let me get you some dinner. And she was really being sweet. And I'm sitting on the sofa and one of the guys calls up and says, Erwin, we got a basketball court. You want to come play ball? I said, let me check. And I went up to Kim and she was in the kitchen. I said, hey, hon, after I take out the garbage, I was wondering if it'd be all right with you, if I go out and play ball with the guys. And I said, I know how important it is to you that I have, really good male friends. And she said, you've been gone 2 weeks. Instead of being home with me, you want to go play basketball with the guys. Well, when she put it like that, it sounded so bad, And I said, kinda, and I wasn't giving up yet. And then Kim looked at me and she said, sure, go right ahead. See, if it had not been my keen understanding of frequencies, my marriage would have ended that day. I heard what she said, but I felt what she meant. But it goes even deeper than that. I was speaking at an event in Germany. I think there's like 5,000 leaders there. And I'm bringing this message that I know will be very difficult in Germany. They have a very painful history with the concept of leadership. And because they have lost their belief in healthy leadership, they've lost their belief in leadership. In the middle of my talk, I made a statement that I knew would be very controversial. And as I'm speaking, my translator is brilliant. I say a line, he says a line. I say a line, he says a line. And it was almost rhythmic in the way we were working together. And then I made this statement, and then he made the statement, and I stopped in front of thousands of people. And I said, wait a minute. You did not say what I just said. He goes, what? I said, you did not say what I just said. You changed what I said. He goes, you don't speak German. I said, that's not the point. Did you change what I said to say what you thought I should have said? He said, I did. Because you couldn't possibly believe that. And I said, I'm sure you're wrong. He goes, but how could you know? Let me tell you how I know. I spent my life studying human frequencies. There is a language humans speak that goes far beyond words. And if we can learn how to hear each other, we can learn how to understand each other and how to connect at the deepest human level. Part of the reason I'm excited about being here is that I love when the church leads the way. When I came into my faith journey, I'd never been in a church in my life. I didn't know that there was a global training ground for piano players, but that was the church. Before that, there was a global training center for organists. There was always an organist. In Miami, there was an organist. In New York, there's an organist. In Billings, Montana, there's an organist. Who would have guessed in Idaho, the one skill someone had was to play the organ? You know why? Because every church in the world had an organ, and wherever you see a need, you create a talent. And then I didn't know that the greatest singers in the world came out of the church, but they did. That the greatest forms of American music came out of the church, but they did. And I didn't know there were so many great communicators in the world, because all I had ever heard were political candidates. And they're terrible. But an average pastor is better than a great politician as a communicator, because the church creates the environment for the vast expression of being human. I want to give us a challenge. No one in the world should be better, not only at communicating, but at listening than us. No one should take more seriously the power of words than those of us who are followers of Jesus. If anyone believes that God spoke and all creation came into existence, and that you are created in the image and likeness of God, then you should take more seriously than anyone on the planet the power that has been given to us through the words we speak to each other. Is there anything more powerful than having someone look at you when it's undeserved and say, I forgive you? Is there anything that can change you more than someone that you respect look at you and say, I believe in you? Is there anything more healing than someone whose love we do not deserve look at you and say, I love you? Jesus tells us that his sheep know his voice, that he calls us out by name, and that no other voice, no other shepherd will follow. And what's fascinating to me is we never connected the dots between Jesus talking about the voice and the life. Because in the same chapter in John 10, when Jesus says, my sheep hear my voice, he says, I have come to give you life. He says, the thief comes to rob and to steal and to kill, but I've come to give you life and life in abundance. How does the thief come to rob and to steal and to kill? By being the voice you listen to in your inner soul, and by shaping inside of you the wrong voices. And how does Jesus give us life except by becoming the voice that brings life to our souls? The same God who spoke, let there be light, and all the universe came into existence, is the same God that can speak into a human soul and bring light and life and love and freedom. And God has given you that power to speak life into another human being. It is not accidental that the Bible says if you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God has raised him from the dead, you will be saved. Because your words are a reflection of your essence, and your essence is the material from which you create. You as a human being have been created to create. The future is not waiting for you out there. The future is waiting for you in here. The future comes from within us. And as we step into life, God uses us to create, and he gives you the power to speak life and create a future the world has never imagined. What would happen if we took our words so seriously that we believed our words create worlds inside of us? God bless. Oh. I'm gonna pray. Father, I thank you for the thousands of people in this room who have committed their lives to serving, especially children and young people. God, you bring us into the world so pliable, so adaptable. You bring us into the world to be shaped and influenced. And God, I thank you for these individuals who've taken on that stewardship so deeply. I pray, God, you would give power to their words to speak life into every child. That through their words, they would destroy the destructive power of guilt and shame. They would speak life and forgiveness and freedom. And Jesus, together, we thank you that you are the word, the voice, you are the frequency, that when we hear you, we live. May that life emanate from every word we speak. We pray in your name. Amen. God bless you guys.